The St. Ignatius Wildcats head to Cincinnati on Saturday afternoon as the 8-0 #1 team in the state. St. Ignatius takes on the 5-3, the #4 team, St. Xavier, in a crucial situation. Welcome to the St. Ignatius Broadcasting Networks across the table. He's Greg Ziton, I'm John Fanta. And Greg, the coaching staff said at the end of last Saturday night against St. Francis, it's playoff time, and certainly playoff implications are on the line for Saturday, particularly for St. Xavier. They are in a crucial situation. The Wildcats come out a 56-0 shutout winner over St. Francis last Saturday night. So talk about this big week as the battle for the Cannon Bell returns.
Well, you mentioned the playoff implications, and like you said, this is obviously it's a very big game for the Wildcats, but as far as the playoffs are concerned, this game's probably much more important for the Bombers because they come in at 5-3. If they lose, you can effectively wipe them out of the playoffs. Right now they sit as the #9 seed in Region 4. Top 8 make the playoffs. And you look at it after the Wildcats, they play a very good Louisville St. Xavier team that is also undefeated, so they need the wins badly, and the Wildcats at this point, you know, it's more about playoff seeding than necessarily getting into the playoffs, but obviously both teams have a lot to play for.
The Bombers came out, they made a statement right away. They started 2-0. They got a big Week 1 win over Middletown High School, 43-39. In Week 2, they beat Indianapolis Cathedral 33-27, but then came Week 3, and they lost to a very good Cincinnati Coleraine High School team. They lost by 3, 31-28 in a tough battle. And Greg, that's where now the Bombers have 3 losses coming off a tough loss to the St. Edward Eagles. That's where you look at how tough this schedule has been for them. And it could come back to bite them. And it is going to this week because now they're in a situation where it's potentially win or else you might be staying home.
Yeah, exactly. When you look at it, they have an absolutely brutal schedule. When you look at it, the only 3 teams they've lost to are all undefeated. Coleraine, like you said, they lost to by a field goal. Well, Coleraine's pretty good themselves. They're ranked as high nationally as the Wildcats are, in that 10-15 range, depending on the poll. And then you look at the next week, they lost to Trinity from Louisville, Kentucky. Guess what? They're nationally ranked. They're in the top 15 in just about every poll. And then last week, they fall to St. Ed's 27-16. Well, St. Ed's is now #2 ranking in the state. So they're losing a couple games more than they're used to, but they're losing to outstanding opponents. And they're going to play another one Saturday against the Wildcats. And, you know, this is going to be absolutely crucial for their season.
As we said, the Bombers fell to St. Edward, now the #2 team in the state, 27-16, as Ryan Fallon and the Eagles' high-flying offense came out. They had a solid start. They were able to hold off the Bombers' attempts at a comeback. And Greg, it was certain that the Bombers had chances to get back into this ballgame, but still falling by 11. A blocked punt that the Eagles converted on as the Bombers making a special teams error. And then, coming off that, they had a goal line stand. This Eagle defense stood firm and denied the Bombers later on in the ballgame. And that was huge. That was the true dagger that ended up sending St. Xavier away.
Yeah, those 2 plays right there just tell you how close the game was. If the punt doesn't get blocked, you can pretty much take away 7 points from St. Ed's. And if St. Xavier is able to convert on their, first and goal drive from inside the Eagles' 5-yard line and they're able to score, you've got a completely different ball game that the Bombers very well could have won. So St. Xavier had chances, they just weren't able to take advantage of enough of them.
And the St. Edward Eagles will take on Cincinnati Mulder. That's down in Cincinnati, too. So there will be 2 different contests going on that have a lot of drama expected on Saturday. It's going to be a fun Saturday in Cincinnati for high school football. It certainly will be. The Wildcats come in, and Greg, this defense has been outstanding. They still have only given up 58 points. 58 points in 8 games here now in play. This defense, they've been nothing short of excellent. They have really set the standard, and that's why the Wildcats are where they are. Mike Lamanna and Tim McVeigh have fed off that. You talk about it. It all starts with the big man, Dave Katusha, too.
It really does. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen his importance as far as, looking against John Adams, which granted isn't a fantastic opponent, but Katusha was getting to the ball carrier before the ball carrier was getting the handoffs. That's how impressive he was. Last week he kept it up. So early in the season, he was doing well, but you didn't necessarily notice him because of the double teams and the multiple blockers he was taking up. But now he's starting to make plays and take up all those blockers, which is really special to watch.
This Wildcat defense, you can't say enough about them. Brian Fisher with 2 interceptions and a deflected punt as well against St. Francis, and he has really emerged as a star for this defense. They all have been outstanding, but Fisher's been a standout here. And when you talk about his story, Greg, he started out in freshman, sophomore year, really at the quarterback spot, and he talked to the coaching staff, and they had him become accustomed now to playing at safety, and he's certainly done a very good job of it.
And if you ask him, he'll tell you playing quarterback has helped him play safety. He's able to read the quarterbacks more effectively, kind of try and figure out where they're going to go with their reads, and we've seen it with all the interceptions he's had. And when you look at this Wildcat defense, though, if you're looking for impact players, just name all 11 guys, because really not a whole lot of individual stars, or maybe I should put it this way, they're all individual stars and there aren't really any that shine much brighter than the others, because every single one of those guys has made plenty of big plays.
There are quite many teams who have individual stars and are ranked nationally and have kids going off to college. But you can have individual stars, but you have to have a team. In this case, they are a team of stars, and this defense has led to the Wildcats' offensive success. You can't forget about Tim McVeigh in this game. He will be a difference maker as he is week in and week out. McVeigh now standing, Greg, when you look at where he's at, he has just been so overpowerful. He's making defenses miss left and right. It's been so tough to bring him down. And the thing that separates him is the fact that he realizes that he has to make people miss and get through people in order to run for more yards. Talk about Tim and what he can do in this ballgame, because when you spread out the Bomber defense like the Wildcats will, then that can lead to McVeigh.
Exactly. You look at what St. Ed's did against St. Xavier. They had a lot of success rushing. They had 189 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns against the Bombers, which, when you think St. Xavier football, usually the first thing you think of is a fantastic run defense. This year, it's not quite up to their standard, but St. Ed's was able to take advantage of it, like you said, spreading out that Xavier defense and then running mostly to the outside, but sometimes to the inside as well. And you look at the Wildcats with Tim McVeigh, we're going to see an awful lot of him, at least you would expect. He had 3 touchdowns last week, and we've seen all year long, this year, last year, even when he was a sophomore, if he gets near the goal line and he has the football, he's going to find a way to score.
McVeigh with 44 career touchdowns now. He's only 7 behind Eric Haddad. Haddad stands at 51, and Haddad has encouraged McVeigh. He said, go and shoot for the stars, shoot for 60. McVeigh has continually been fantastic for the Wildcats, and that's what also has helped the emergence of Mike Lamanna as now a household name around high school football when you think about it. Lamanna, he has made so many connections, Greg, whether it's Hennessy, Siragusa, Zingali, Highland, it goes on, and talk about how he approaches this St. X defense, because they're going to be ready with intensity.
That they will be. They like to bring an awful lot of pressure, so when you look at Lamanna, you look at more of those quick throws, whether it be a 3-step drop, just being in the shotgun, or something of that sort. But the Wildcats all year long have been running a lot of quick slants, a lot of flat passes to who other than Tim McVeigh. So Lamanna's got a lot of options in the quick passing game. And, as good as the Wildcats' offensive line has been, he may have time to sit back and let those deep routes develop for his receivers. But even if that's not the case, a lot of options with all those different receivers you mentioned for short, whether it's crossing patterns, slant routes, or anything of the sort.
Impact players for the Bombers offensively, you'll see Trey Kilgore. Greg, we know his name because in 2011, over at John Carroll, Kilgore had a breakout game. And that's how the Bombers ended up taking the Cannon Bell back home with them, because, Greg, he was nothing short of fantastic. The kid was all over the field, making very good plays, and now he's back again this year, and he's an impact player. He has had some injury troubles, but came back last week against St. Ed's, and he had a breakout day for the St. X receiver core. So talk about what Kilgore brings to the field.
Well, first of all, I think we got to go back to last year when you talk about Kilgore. Last year against the Wildcats, he was actually the Bombers quarterback for the game, and that was actually the only game he played quarterback for the Bombers that year. So really some interesting move by their coaches, but it worked well. He was not the most prolific thrower, but boy, could he run. He burned the Wildcats for a couple of big runs, including some scores, and really just all the maneuverability you could want in a running back he had from the quarterback spot. This year we'll see him at wide receiver, which is his normal position, And that St. Ed's game, as you mentioned, his first game in the year, he's battled some injury troubles, but he's a big guy. He's about 6'2", 6'3". He's committed to Michigan State as a wide receiver, very talented. Yep. Had 6 catches and a touchdown against the Eagles, so you got to look for him catching passes from quarterback Nick Tensing, who himself is a dual threat. He likes to run as well. He's got almost 500 rushing yards on the season.
Yeah. He has 1,650 yards, 14 touchdowns as well. Tensing, it'll be a battle of the southpaws because he also is a lefty, Lamanna on the other side, so you don't see that quite a bit. So 2 lefty slingers that we will see on Saturday over at Balaban. A tough place to play, 2 o'clock afternoon start. It really shows the fellowship that these two schools show, whether it's both bands joining up, both choruses, they'll be joining. I know that the advancement department will be going down there as well as the other departments joining up with St. Xavier High School because it's more than just the game. It's a true fellowship between both Jesuit schools, and that's what this weekend is all about. Even players staying at each other's houses despite all the intensity. And folks, we're expecting an outstanding one because St. Xavier, Greg, attitude adjustment now from St. Ed's, where you go in and you're on the road, you're trying to take down the Eagles at Lakewood, which is no easy task, so you just got to let it fly. Now this week, they've got to be ready to win this ballgame because if they don't, they need quite a bit of help because in Week 10, you go back to it, St. Xavier from Louisville, Kentucky. That's a team that's out of state. Not going to help you a ton in OHSAA.
No, but you look at, you mentioned the friendly rivalries. Yes, the JV players will stay at St. Xavier players' houses. Yes, there will be community masses. I mean, the schools do have a very special bond between the two of them being Jesuit schools with the things like that and the other events they do together you mentioned. But have no doubt, it'll be an extremely fierce game. We can't emphasize it enough. St. Xavier, for them, this is an absolute must-win. There's no other way to put it.
So it will be very exciting on the SIBN. We will come to you live with pregame at 1:30, the Prudential Lucian Realty pregame show. At 2 o'clock, we'll have the kickoff. We'll have 2 special halftime guests with the president of St. Ignatius High School, Father Murphy. He will be coming on with us as well as Father Howe from St. Xavier. So that all comes to you live on the SIBN Saturday, 1:30 pregame, 2 o'clock kickoff. Greg, we're heading to Cincinnati. And the football season has never gotten better.
And we want our bell back.